Hello, and welcome to episode number 66 of the ML Running Pains podcast. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Saft, and today I've got kind of a special little episode. I have two separate guests. Topics are very different, but my second guest felt that the information and the episode itself was time relevant. So our first guest is Miriam Salloum, my friend and physical therapist, who's been on multiple episodes and talked about a variety of different parts of the body and maladies and things that can go wrong and ways that we can resolve them and tips for training and such. So today we're going to talk about the shins. So we have a kind of an in-depth conversation about the shins, and actually we get into a lot of relevant information, not only about the shins, but kind of about shoes and cadence and all sorts of stuff. So the information can help even if you're not having shin trouble. So I hope the conversation is helpful to you. And the second conversation is with Cany Woodward. Cany was just on last week as we talked about advocacy as trail runners. Cany, between that time and now, ran the Cruel Jewel 100 and won and set a new course record. So I actually got to sit down in person with Cany and have a face-to-face interview, which was awesome. And we get to hear about his adventure there and how things went. So I hope you enjoy that conversation as well. And then at the end, I'll just catch up on some things that have gone on around here and get you up to speed with everything in this world, the MR running pains world. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Miriam, and thank you to both my guests for coming on today. I am welcoming back to the show, as I said in my introduction, my good friend Miriam Salloum. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm good, Aaron. Thanks again for having me on. This is great.
Absolutely. Yes. It's Miriam, if you want to just touch base for those listeners that haven't met you in any previous episodes, which I will put all of our previous episodes in the show notes as resources, because we've gone over some really good fundamentals about the body and maladies that can occur to any runner. But if you want to just touch base on your background and yourself.
Yeah, great, thanks. Yes, my name is Miriam Salloum. I'm a physical therapist here in the Asheville area. I've been practicing physical therapy for about 21 years now. And during that same time, I've had an independent running clinic specializing in the biomechanical analysis of runners and helping them with running injuries primarily. So it's pretty much my life's work and what I love to do. So I really have loved being on the show talking about that and hopefully helping people circumvent some of those problems that we run into as runners.
I've heard from multiple listeners as a gratuity to you to say thank you for doing these talks, because it sure does help a lot of people. So thank you. Miriam is also an ultra runner. And I believe you have an event coming up, do you not?
Yeah, thanks. I had a really nice client. She's also a friend, and unfortunately she couldn't do her registration for the Black Mountain Monster that's coming up. And so she gave it to me, and I was really excited because I've done this event before. I did it in 2019. It's kind of funny. It was the same thing. It kind of just happened at the last minute, and it was something I felt really excited about. So it's for those of you that don't know about this race, but it's a really great race. It has a 6, 12, and 24-hour event, and so you can register. And they have a 5K loop course, usually through the Montreat campus. And so so I'm training for that, and I've really been enjoying it for the last month. It's kind of like last minute emergency training, but I feel it's been feeling pretty good. So I'm excited to give it a try.
Your training sounds like it's been going well. When David Workman, who I talk about on this podcast quite frequently as my adventure partner, he and I did the Art Lobe that day. You did a 20 miler, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
I think you guys look better than I did though when you came out from the Art Lobe. I think. Oh, you guys did amazing. You guys really did. You're unreal. You're really unreal.
Oh, thank you. And also, in case I forget to mention the introduction, my apologies for my voice to everybody. Keegan, my son, had his mile in which he broke 5 minutes for the first time last night, and I'm a bit hoarse from cheering on the kids at the track meet. So bear with my voice. I apologize. But today's episode, we are going to get into the shins. We kind of just kind of skipped over them. We went from, I think, the Achilles up to the knee, but we missed a big in between, and that being the shins. So, Miriam, if you would, just kind of go over what's involved in the shin, because we're talking about a big region here in the front of the leg. So, how many muscles are we talking about, and what does that entail?
Yeah. So the shin, if you feel onto the bone that's right below the knee, that is your shin bone. That's the large, thick bone between the knee and the ankle. And then there's actually on the outside is this tiny little bone. It kind of looks like a wishbone, but it's called the fibula. And that's also an accessory bone that has interaction with the tibia. It's not accessory, by definition, but it's a much thinner bone along the tibia. And that junction there is where a lot of the lower leg muscles originate that go into the foot and ankle. So we can talk about some of those. Some of those muscles extend from the upper region of the hip down into the shin, and some originate actually in the shin. But it's also a place where we see a lot of injuries. And I'll break it up into populations because we kind of can. There's different kinds of injuries, I think, that are more common with different demographics of runners. So we can talk about young runners, youth runners, adolescent runners, novice runners, and then, of course, our more endurance runners and some of those issues.
Okay, great. I guess one of those, first issues we could talk about would be shin splints. As we commonly hear them referred to. Can you describe this for us and kind of tell us what we're really talking about?
Yeah, so shin splints are something that we hear a lot about because in of itself, whenever we start a new activity that maybe has a little bit more loading on, and even on a different surface, sometimes our body will respond with having a little bit of irritation around the front of the tibia. So if you walk your fingers down right under the knee and walk it down the front of the shin, that can be a little bit tender throughout. And that can be sometimes just a normal response, as long as it shakes out after, a temporary amount of time. So sometimes if you start a new sport, that especially involves jumping, so something like, especially with kids, like with cheerleading, or if you start a new HIIT class as an adult, or you start running a little bit more roads and trail, sometimes you can have a little bit of shin soreness to start out with. And as long as it shakes out relatively soon, that's just a normal response of your bone adapting to that increased stress. So it can be a normal response to adaptation. What we really want to make sure of is we're not getting into that abnormal or injurious zone where that soreness is becoming progressively worse.
Gotcha. And you had talked about the different groupings, that we could talk about. Does this fall into any of those specifically, or is this something we see across the board?
Yeah. So again, that kind of normal adaptation to a change in surface or activity, that can be across the board. So for kids, again, that could be like cheerleading or doing or basketball or something like that, where they're just starting a sport. Their shins are just a little bit sore, but again, within the first week or two, it's really shaking out and it's getting much better. And it's the same with adults. Say you're a novice runner, you're starting to run for the first time. Usually those programs are kind of a walk run. Those are great, really gradual programs. Just a bit of shin soreness in the beginning, but again, shaking out within the first week or two is really what we want to see with something like that. So it can be across the board, and it's great. Our bodies are really great at adapting, and so that's what it's doing. It's the bone is responding to a new stress, becoming a little bit more sound and adapting to that stress, and then we can tolerate it without pain. And that's what we want to see on a normal basis.
That would make sense for, usually at the beginning of like a track season, we see a lot of kids that are, complaining about their shins, because, well, it's a change of surface, just as you just said.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
Right, of course. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
Just keep an eye on it. And I tell that to all adults parents and coaches, just keep checking in with them, so that they're making sure that their pain levels are getting better,
Right.
within that first couple of weeks.
Sure. I guess that would go for adults as well, because we've got these, it's usually like a Tuesday track workout, so if you're new to Tuesday track, just, be cognizant of if your shins are, becoming activated and, and sensitive. That's, that's, what we're talking about here. Okay. What are some common causes of medial shin pain? So when we say medial, for those that aren't familiar with the term, we're talking about the towards the inside, or the arch side of the foot and leg. So the inner muscles. So what would be some common causes there?
Yeah, so technically we call that soreness on the inside of the tibia or the shin medial tibial stress syndrome. And this is, again, sometimes it can just be a normal response to loading. As you walk your fingers down the inside of the tibia, this is usually what we'll feel like the bottom half will globally kind of be sore along that lines. And so medial tibial stress syndrome can sometimes involve muscles of the soleus and the posterior tib, and what's also called the flexor digitorum longus. There's a slew of muscles that have some insertion sites along there, and they can pull not only at the bone. The periosteum of the bone is very, very sensitized. It has a lot of nerve endings. So as they pull along that tibia, it becomes very sensitive and sore. So sometimes it can have to do with impact. Sometimes it can have to do with how rapid people are loading, and we can talk about that a little bit. But that's what it's called, medial tibial stress syndrome. And again, it's something that it's not uncommon, but we also want to see that dissipating within the first, I would say, 2 weeks of a new activity. Otherwise, and especially if it's getting worse, we want to have some kind of intervention.
Okay. Well, why don't you, just touched on loading. Why don't you go ahead and expound on that?
Great. Let's maybe first talk about like the adult runner,
Sure.
and including also the novice runner. So if you are experiencing shin pain, maybe you're starting out a new sport, or you're trying a new speed or a new distance, and you're starting to have pain we'll talk about first on the front of the shin. So sometimes reasons for that can be one, either overstriding. So sometimes that is when we start loading the leg, when we first make contact with the ground, with the knee in a more extended position. So these, sometimes what feels like a really long stride, or a stride that feels like you're reaching out. This is super common when people start changing terrain and we're being more on flats or downhills, especially doing a lot more downhill training. You can start to have that. And there's no difference between what you would call like a shin splint, and then we kind of have a continuum of a stress reaction where the bone starts to have some changes in edema and inflammation along the periosteum, and then into a stress fracture. And that's when there's actually a crack in the periosteum from enough loading or enough impact. And so they're all on the spectrum. And so really we want to start making changes to that when we're in that kind of shin splint to stress reaction phase. So usually, again, that can be overstriding, and we can talk about some different things to do with that. Also, some people have a lot of mobility to their lower legs, and when they load and they land onto one leg, the hip, the knee, and the ankle all rotate and collapse very rapidly. That's also something that creates a lot of torque, and torque is rotational force. The bones of the shin do not like that very much. So sometimes the loading event, or when you land and there's a lot of rotational force through the leg, that can also cause a bony stress injury. So those are the two main events during running, especially for the adult runner, that can cause those kinds of injuries.
Okay. And then did you want to touch on the next group?
Yeah, so for kids, and the reason I really want to bring this up is because with kids, we start seeing more of the issues with stress injuries very early on. So as adults, we usually don't see as many stress fractures as we do with our kids. And that's because, the bony injuries are a little bit more prominent in that group. So with kids, we see a lot of times there's some good research that weakness in calf muscles can be part of that. So making sure that they have enough strength of their calf muscles when they start running and mobility. And then again, kind of overstriding. So, with the younger populations, tibial stress injuries and stress fractures are a lot more prominent. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen in our adult populations. It definitely does. But it's definitely more prominent in our youth athletes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Right on. And then you had also mentioned in there about overstriding. Mm-hmm. What are some cues that you can tone into, or ways that you can work on not overstriding?
Yeah. And this is something I think that happens, just to kind of put it on something that people can relate to, especially if you start a speed workout. Okay, especially if you're doing it with other people, because obviously the thing that's top of mind is just going as fast as you can, and trying to hold it as long as you can, and that kind of thing. So I think speed workouts are a place where people can start getting into overstriding issues. Running sometimes with friends that are different paces than yourself. Sometimes that can have people to start kind of changing their gait and overstriding, or what we call a novice runner, someone that's just starting their running program. And so overstriding again is when we reach out and we land with the knee in a relatively straight position. And it's very hard to know how you're landing. There's some good research where they ask runners to tell them exactly how they land, and even experienced runners are like, they'll give the reports, and they will see on video analysis that it's incorrect. So it's very hard to know that. But if you're starting to have shin pain, and some of these things are ringing a bell, like, oh yeah, I just started running, or I have been running with a faster group or a speed workout. What I really recommend people to do is to look at what their cadence is. And a lot of times you can see this on your watch. And a cadence is the number of footfalls that we have within a minute. So what you can do is you can just pick a leg, and within 30 seconds, kind of count how many times that one leg hits the ground and multiply it by 4. So you can take a couple of different samples of that and see what your cadence is during your run, or you can look at your watch and see what your average cadence is. We have kind of this theoretical 180 steps per minute as being this kind of, ideal cadence. The number of times, again, your feet will hit the ground, both feet will hit the ground within a minute. If you find that you're on the lower end of that, in the 140s, 150s, 160s, you might want to bring it up just about 10%. So just do a little equation, find 10% of your current cadence and bring it up a little bit, and see if you can start to match that. You can use a metronome app on your phone. That's perfectly fine. There's, I think it's called My Run Cadence. There's a couple different apps where you can use some feedback and just match your footfalls to the beat. So that's one way that you can start to work on your cadence. I just recommend when you start doing that, running alone for those times when you're trying to focus on it, and being sure not to speed up. So say that you run a 10-minute mile and you want to work on your cadence. During that 10-minute mile, your cadence is 150. All right. Go out on that same run. Keep your pace around that 10-minute mile. And then again, you can bring it up to that 10%, so 165 steps per minute, listening to the little beat of a metronome. And that way, we're soundly bringing those footfalls a little bit closer under your body, and also bending the knee a little bit more, so that when you load, that knee is flexed and it acts as more of a shock absorber. That's the big thing with this, is that we're allowing our body to be a natural shock absorber and that kind of motion. So the knee is flexed and the tibia is in a much better position to absorb shock. So cadence is a really great way to start to do that, and getting the feeling of having the legs land underneath you versus out in front of you. So that's an easy way to do it. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. If you have more, can we just touch on a few things here with cadence, and then we can,
Oh yeah, sure. And that's from a great study by Brian Heiderscheit. You can find that on Google Scholar. But that's some great work he did
you
in the research.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
I don't even think I could spell that last name. So a few things that came to mind when you were discussing cadence. the metronome, which can drive absolutely yourself and everybody around you totally nuts. Spotify, my wife Beth uses Spotify. They have a 180 cadence channel. And it's just songs that are, in a beat that's 180. So if you want to just put it to music, they have their own channel for that. So you don't have to have the metronome beeping at you. A question to you. A number of my athletes we've been trying to work on cadence as something to be, as you said, injury preventive, and also just to, make them a little bit more efficient. But what ends up happening is they try to increase their cadence, but at the same time, they end up increasing their pace too much, and then their heart rate, goes up, and the effort becomes too hard. Do you have any kind of hints or tips for them that that will help them not increase the pace so much, but at the same time, be able to increase the cadence?
Yeah, and actually, what I would recommend is going to address both of those comments you made. So within the study, anytime that we do any kind of changes in a gait form, and for people that are maybe dealing with injury, but they feel terrified of changing their gait or that kind of thing, just know in the world of running-related injury research, changes in gait are meant to manipulate forces in a way to help healing, and they can either be a temporary change, or if you feel like it's something that eventually makes you more efficient, you can keep it. But in the world of running-related injuries and gait retraining, we use these tools or these factors that we can manipulate to address a certain injury. So we're talking about shin pain, and especially this also went into our knee pain discussion, and we're looking at cadence. These are two big things with the cadence drills. One is when you're learning a new cadence, it's extremely hard. I know it sounds so easy to say, look, I usually run at 150 steps a minute. I'm just going to bump it up a bit. It's going to be easy as pie. I'm going to get the hang of this within a day or two. It'll be fine. And we really don't find that with the research. And I always tell my clients this, when you're learning a new drill, it's like learning a language, or it's like learning a dance step. You have to ingrain it. In the research, we find that runners are able to ingrain things within about 8 sessions over about 4 weeks, over about 2 weeks. So we're looking at 4 running sessions each week with very strong feedback. And so the only caveat to the music thing is a lot of times if you're having a hard time finding the beat, like this is an entirely new movement pattern. I really recommend people use that really irritating beat. I'll even tell them, like, turn it on for a couple minutes, turn it off for a couple minutes, turn it back on. That's totally fine. But I think to be super successful in the beginning, especially when we have that 8 session parameter in the research that seems to be doing really well as far as having positive changes, using that really irritating beat without the music background is really helpful. And then once you have it under your belt, go to the music background, because then it's you're not learning as much anymore. And then the second thing that you brought up about the pace, so in Heiderschreit's research, we want to keep the same speed while we're ingraining the new pattern. And you're learning this new cadence. You don't want your speed to change. That variable has to stay the same. So ideally, a treadmill is the best place to learn that. Okay, so if you had the example before of the 10 miles per hour, or if you're doing a 10-minute mile, whatever it may be, keeping that constant so you can do that on the treadmill. If you don't have access to a treadmill, and this is why I really recommend people to do this on their own without people around them, as far as having other distractions, is trying to keep the same speed, even if it's a little bit easier than what they run, just to work on that turnover, because you don't want to speed up at the same time you're advancing your cadence, because obviously then you can start to overstride again. So I usually have people kind of work on their own, or even do smaller segments on the treadmill if they can find one that's available to them. But keeping that speed constant while they're doing that ingraining period, again, during that 8-session ingraining period, is really optimal.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. You also said that, we're looking at like trying to do like a 10% increase. So, I've also heard and I'm sure this is just kind of splitting hairs, but to go up by 5%, just so it's not as large of an increase. So like, if they're sitting at 160, if you did 10%, it'd be 16. So we're looking at 16 more steps, per minute, which, is that is that too much, or do you think that's still doable? You said 10%, so I'm imagining that's, the research is showing 10% is just fine.
Oh yeah, and they actually have kind of split that, where 7% is another one that's used out there too. And honestly, I think if you just improve it a little bit, it makes a big difference. It really does.
Okay.
When you're talking about, so who's not in the range that I really worry about it. So when I have a runner come in, there have been some studies. If someone's around in the mid 170s, they usually show those runners to be a little bit more injury resilient than runners in lower cadences. So I usually don't mess with things if people are in the mid 170s. But yeah, when we start getting to the 140s and 50s and 60s, that's when we can tamper a little bit.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Anything else there on cadence, or and then did you have anything else that you wanted to touch on for helping people with this type of shin pain?
Oh, with overstriding, you mean?
Yeah.
No, the cadence is super helpful for that. And while you're working on it, try to avoid extreme downhills for a while, especially on the road, because that's obviously more impact. So while you're trying to get over your shin splints and working on that, just kind of keep that a little bit more level. So yeah.
Would that include speed as well in that same sense? So like a speed session, because you are generating more force. So in other words, like doing high intensity intervals, that type of thing.
Yeah. So if someone comes in, their shins are sore, I don't think they're in the parameter of a stress reaction or something, or stress fracture. I usually have them lay off a little bit of their speed workouts. We're either cutting them in half or taking a week or two off just temporarily until they heal. Because we know bone for the most part heals pretty well. And I do want to touch on a little bit of when those cases are where we don't have people that heal very well, when they have what we call now REDS, which is relative energy deficiency in sports. That's when there might be a bone density issue. But yeah, so if someone is, again, and they're a healthy individual, they're a healthy runner, and we just need their bone to catch up healing wise, but we want to keep them running, I will take down some of those speed workouts and downhills just to the bone remodels.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, you're really touching on a lot here, so that's amazing. So yeah, let's talk about REDS. I like how the terminology has changed so that now it incorporates everyone, right? So because primarily when we began talking about this type of would you call it a syndrome?
Yeah, it used to be called the female triad, and I think that was I don't think that was a good description to encompass everyone that was in there. And totally. I like the change into calling it REDS. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So go ahead and let's get into REDS and how this can affect us.
Yeah. And this is, again, so parents and coaches that might be listening, you probably already know about this, but this is something really important to learn about for youth athletes. So REDS, relative energy deficiency in sports. And when I talk about this with parents and kids and athletes, I basically put my hands out flat and tell them to think about things in a scale way. And on one side, we have the intake of energy, which we usually have as calories, and then how we have our energy expenditure, which is our activity. And when we start to, the scales start to become imbalanced, we're not taking in enough energy or enough fuel for those sports, okay, for the energy that we're expending. The body can actually have a response where it starts to leach calcium out of the bones. There's a lot of different responses to, they found changes with heart function, blood vessels, cognitive issues. But the big thing with the bones is the leaching of the calcium. So when that happens, we're not dealing with a healthy system. We're not dealing with bone that's going to remodel at a normal rate. It also can't take normal stresses. So that's when we start to see, and this is especially common with young people, but we also see this also in our adult athletes sometimes as well, but especially when we're talking about middle school, high school, collegiate athletes, this is something that we see a lot, especially if someone has multiple stress fractures. They have a history of multiple stress fractures. And it's a conversation that we start to have with parents, their physician, their nutritionist, their sports psychologist. It's a team approach. And I think nowadays it's a lot more, people talk about it a lot more, and because it's very common. And it's something that can be addressed and solved, but it needs to be noted, especially when we're talking about someone having a stress reaction or stress fracture of the shin. So that's what relative energy deficiency in sports means, REDS.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure.
Very cool. Well, who knew that talking about the medial shin problems could have such conversation? So we've talked about the medial. How about lateral? What type of things cause lateral shin pain?
Yeah, that's a little bit more infrequent. So this is where we start to remember that little wishbone I talked about with the fibula on the outside,
Yep.
And there's muscles that attach to that. And I see this a lot more when people have issues when they load, where either their mechanics causes their lower body to either bow out to the side for whatever reason, or we see this a little bit more with kind of structural, with more either structural or asymmetric side to side mechanics and loading. So if their hip juts out or their knee juts out, or their landing position with their foot is a little bit askew, that's where I see a little bit more of that kind of lateral pain. So that's usually a biomechanics issue. Sometimes it's a structural one, but usually and when I say that, it doesn't necessarily mean they're overstriding. I guess we see a little bit less of that. So if you are having lateral shin pain, I really would have somebody review your gait, because there's something probably going on during the loading response for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Along that same vein, can footwear ever be a cause of shin pain in any region of the shin?
Yeah, definitely. It can go both ways. So some people have shin pain when they go to a minimalist shoe, just because it places a higher demand on the calf. And usually that's a transient response. Usually that's temporary. Their calves are just working harder. Their bone doesn't have as much, midsole material to, help slow down the rate of either pronation or supination. So usually that's a transient response. But having a shoe that has a little bit less sole to it does increase the work of the calf musculature, and the bone has to take on a little bit more force. But usually we see this as more of a temporary thing. You can have a shoe that's way too stiff and hard. And that can, just like running on a hard road, that can cause problems also with shin pain. And sometimes people respond very well to having material, either whether it be with an arch support that can be over the counter, or having a shoe that has a little bit more cush to it. Sometimes people feel some relief in their shin pain because it just slows down the rate of their transition into pronation. So yeah, shoe wear can definitely be either something that's the impetus for having shin pain, or it can relieve it. So if you've had someone that comes in and they're like, I didn't start having shin pain until I changed these shoes, and everything else about the same, it's worth taking a look at those shoes and kind of seeing what they're doing for that person and seeing what kind of runner they are. You kind of want to fit that runner to what shoe they feel comfortable in.
Right.
Yeah.
Can the same be said for stability shoes? For instance, too much or not enough? Because wouldn't that, kind of change your biomechanical pattern? Yeah.
And so when I was kind of talking about stiff shoes, we don't see these anymore really as much today, but some of those really tri density or super motion control shoes that had super hard components to it. And basically when you would load, you didn't have a lot of material that would compress when you would load it. It can throw people onto the outside of their foot a lot more if that's not appropriate for them. Sometimes an insert that's overcorrective can do that. So totally. And then, you have roads that have camber, so camber is when a road is tilted. And so it has the same effect as if sometimes when people start having issues on the outside of the leg from, running on a surface that has a slant to it. So, they're just an interface. Shoes are just the interface between your foot and the ground. So they totally can, especially if they drive your mechanics one way or the other. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and what Miriam is talking about there, if you picture the road and the slant of the road, if you're always running with your right foot on the downslope and the left foot's on the upslope, even when you come back, your feet are at different angles. So you're creating, probably an overstretch, right, on that right foot.
Yeah. So you're always
shin
running
muscle.
on the outside of your right foot on that side. Yes.
Right. So it's good. Like if you do, kind of an out and back, to when you switch directions, make sure that the left foot goes on the upward slant, just so you're not constantly getting that same wear. So, all right, that's medial, lateral, and then front of the shin. What do you typically? Because sometimes, I'll have a youth come up to me and say, the front of my shin's really bothering me. And that's a lot of times, like we talked about beginning of the season, they're just kind of transitioning to the track, new surface. But is there anything beyond that?
Yeah. So tenderness along the front of the shin. If you feel that's actually a really sharp ridge there, the cortex of the shin. And this is where we kind of get into those questions of when we start having shin pain and it's starting to progress. What do we do when we start to suspect a stress reaction or stress fracture? So along the front of the shin, if that's an area that if we start to suspect a stress reaction or stress fracture, we really want to start having that either looked at or solved, because that is what we call a critical zone. So there's different kinds of stress fractures. A critical zone is one we really just don't want to mess with. This thing has to heal, or the client could be looking at a surgical fixation of some sort. The front of the shin is a place where if we start to develop into a stress fracture, we want to get some imaging, and we usually have to decrease and shut down loading for a little bit if it's a confirmed stress fracture. So that pain along the front of the shin, it's common. But again, we want to make sure that we're starting to solve that and really down-regulate it. If someone can't hop on a leg, like if they're standing on that leg and they're trying to do some squats and on that leg or little hops and it's super painful, they definitely need to have that looked at. Especially if you take one finger and you put it onto that front of the shin and it really kind of makes them jump. That kind of focal small bit of pain on the front of the shin is what we usually see as probably a potential stress fracture on the front of the shin. You want to have that diagnosed and treated. On the x-rays, unfortunately, we're talking about imaging a little bit, but x-rays unfortunately aren't super sensitive to stress fractures. They usually shoot one because they have to, but I feel really lucky to work with a lot of great orthopedic docs here. If it looks that way, sometimes they'll order an MRI or a bone scan, or they'll just assume it is one and treat them accordingly. Now on the inside, the pain on the inside of the shin, that medial tibial stress syndrome, that's usually a little bit more of a larger or broader area of discomfort. And believe it or not, that's actually not what we consider a critical zone. It can be a stress fracture or a stress reaction. We definitely want to improve that. We definitely want to treat that, but we don't want to. We definitely can play around a little bit with those symptoms a little bit more than we do with the pain on the front of the shin. So if we do suspect a stress fracture on the front of the shin, that's a critical zone. If we have stress reaction on the inside of the shin, we can modify activity, try to make that a lot better. But again, if they jump off the table, they can't hop on one leg. You're probably looking at a stress fracture, and we want to also have that treated. So yeah.
We've talked about how we want to kind of increase cadence, which is going to shorten the stride. Which can we talk a minute about footwear? And right now, our industry is coming up with some really interesting designs with midsoles and such. We most shoes, if not all shoes, are going to be to some extent a rocker bottom, right? They're going to help you transition from heel to toe. But we're getting these huge bevels on the back of these heels now, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about foot slap for a second, because we definitely don't want the foot to accelerate too quickly to the ground and really, create that force and that slap of the foot, because those shin muscles are just going to get really taut really quick.
Yeah.
So do you want to touch on like the bevels and what we're seeing with foot slap and how that can affect runners and what runners should be aware of when we talk about these things?
Yeah, and I don't know. I haven't really looked at any of the research reports on it. I don't even know if there are any out yet on those kinds of shoes, but
A lot of this stuff's so new. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, if you can hear, it's nice to use sometimes the sound of your running. It's kind of hard sometimes, but if you're on a treadmill, you can, and usually by yourself, you can do a pretty good job of it. Or if you're by yourself, running, especially on the road. But if you can hear that difference, that's a usually good indication of impact. So I would obviously shy away from that. But yeah, so anything, and even a stiff shoe can kind of do this, where if you do, rear foot strike or heel strike, and heel striking isn't bad. Like I always want to tell people, heel striking in itself is not bad. Pronation is not bad. These are two things that I think really get become villains somehow in our discussion about running, but they're not bad things. And some people are a lot more efficient rear foot striking. So don't think if you're a healthy runner, you're feeling good, and you find out you're a rear foot striker, it's totally fine. But yeah, so if you have a shoe that kind of catapults you and onto the front of your foot, and you do hear that kind of rapid foot slap, and your shins start hurting, yeah, that's something that definitely you want to start looking at, maybe another type of shoe.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, to that extent, like a lot of footwear these days, it's really trying to do a lot of work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I always have been a fan of allowing the foot to do what it wants to do naturally. Are we seeing anything in the research that's that's negative by all of these kind of mechanical devices that are trying to either enhance our gait, or is it displacing forces? We've come so long and far in technology, but even these new super shoes,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything that to them that's maybe we should be a little bit more leery about, how much we're using them, or if we're using them at all?
Yeah, I mean, these are all really great questions. And it gets the question too, like if you're training, if these, and they have pretty much, validated that yes, the 4% shoes do what they say they're gonna do. They do help with running economy. So if you are trying to get an edge with your race, your half marathon or marathon, that there is that it does that does hold water. But when you're talking about training, and you're trying to maximize loads to have a training effect on different soft tissues and bone, where do those shoes kind of fall into that category? Do you want to use other shoes during that time? And I think there's a lot of unknowns with that. But I do think, obviously, I mean, they're not designed to be your only shoes. They don't seem to, you don't have that kind of mileage on them. So, I think having other shoes to train in and be aware of, but yeah, but that's really, you make a good point with all this technology over the decades that shoes have boasted. We really haven't seen injury rates change. It's kind of interesting. So when you see these systematic reviews of the injury rates, we're still seeing the same injury rates. So, you can't really make the research isn't there on a certain shoe design being less injurious. I think there's still the comfort filter. We still have the comfort filter where they find a lot of times the best shoe is the shoe that feels most comfortable to somebody. And really until the 4% shoes came along, there wasn't, other research really out there talking about, other than the minimalist indexed. So we know the more minimalist shoe, the more that it's going to work your calf muscles. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, it's I talked about this just a few episodes ago, that it's, if you can have like a toolbox, if you will, of running shoes, that you have various drops, right? So that your body, and you're using different muscles, it's not always 0 drop, but it's not always 10 or 12 millimeters. You've got this kind of range where the body can make adjustments. And you're kind of not always taxing the same muscles, if you will, if you're training on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So, you kind of touched a little bit about arches and perhaps even insoles, can they ever come into helping in these scenarios, shin splints and pain in the shin?
Yeah, pain in the shins. And so when I have a discussion with a client and we've done their table exam, we've done their video analysis, and we have a really good idea of their own individual systems. So the internal forces that we find from the table exam, and then their mechanics when they run. So the way that they as an individual transfer force externally onto the ground. We talk about some different things we can do to help with their shin pain. What can we do immediately to keep you running? Because that's the name of the game. And again, the only time that really we shut that down is when we suspect a stress fracture, especially a stress fracture in a critical zone. And it does not help to keep running on a stress fracture. I know that sounds like very simple words, but if you do suspect you have one, the quickest way to get back to running is to get rid of it. So if I don't suspect a stress fracture, and there's a lot of things that we see that we can do, some of these temporary changes in gait that we can transfer forces a little bit. Obviously, we can change the internal system with different mobility and strength routines. And then also the research is fairly sound over the years that we can start to buffer some of the forces when we load. And what I like to equate that to is thinking about whatever shoe and or over-the-counter arch support we talk about is acting like a trampoline, okay? So if we're looking at loading mechanics, and very rarely is the foot at fault, like the foot by itself in a little box, the whole fault of shin pain. A lot of times we're looking at how the system above is responding. So let's say we take the example of, which is very typical, a runner, and maybe they have one or two muscles within the hip and core complex that are weak. They have a small aspect to their gait that may be causing them to load a little bit harder than they need to. I know that I can help them change their strength and or mobility if they need to, and change their gait a little bit. But those are changes that take a little bit of time. Okay, so strength changes, we can get some motor control changes within a couple weeks. We get strength changes within 10 to 12 weeks. It takes about 4 sessions to ingrain a motor pattern for the drill. So we're working on all that. And I tell them if they want and they look like they'd be appropriate to it, we can look at having maybe an over-the-counter insert or a change in a shoe that may help dampen or slow down their loading into mid-stance, just like a little trampoline, to help buffer those forces. And this can be a temporary bridge until they're 100% better. It might be something that they like all the time. So I'm not having anyone commit to an insert or commit to a shoe change necessarily, but I do, if I think it's appropriate to help them heal, I'm like, this is just part of the healing process. And again, our number one priority is to keep you running while you're healing. And that's the trick, running and healing at the same time.
Great. And with that said, if we're looking at things that can help promote the healing, while you're still active or just in daily life, we've talked about compression in the past. Is there anything in that realm that can help with, this, not necessarily a stress reaction or a stress fracture, but, potentially with like a shin splint? I know like there's products out there that are specifically designed for shin splints, like kind of a wrap, if you will. Mm-hmm. Then there's like the calf sleeves and the, compression socks and all that stuff. Anything in that realm, can that stuff help?
Yeah. So there's not anything in the research that really supports the use of a compression sock to advance the healing of a stress reaction or obviously a stress fracture. I think they feel good. So I don't think compression socks are ever a bad idea. They do hold some water in the research with recovery, either, after runs or between hard efforts. So, they're great. But they don't really, hold a lot of evidence in themselves that they're going to accelerate the healing process. But a lot of times they feel pretty good. So totally a fine thing to do. But we're talking about that. And even though this was an article that was in the Clinical Journal of Sports Medicine in 2019, It was talking about youth athletes. This is also, I think, very applicable to adults, that the risk factors for these kinds of bone stress injuries. That's what we call those, like along that spectrum of shin splints all the way to stress reactions and stress fractures, or bone stress injuries, BSIs. And I wanted to read these things. So if anything clicked with anybody, sleep. Sleep is a big one. That's when we heal. They did a study where they looked at what did athletes with bone stress injuries have as far as being different than people that did not within the study. They slept less, 7.2 hours versus 8 hours. Even there was a small difference in sleep. I think sleep is a huge one. I mean, I know you as a coach, I mean, you're looking at heart rate stuff, sleep stuff, but that's when we heal. So sleep is super important. Life stress. I think kids have just as much stress as adults. So life stress is a big one. 58%, what'd you say?
I said sometimes more.
Sometimes more. Oh, sometimes more. Totally. 58% of those that were injured did not weight train. Weight training helps build bone. History of shin splints. So the biggest predictor of a stress fracture is a history of a stress fracture. So just know that when you're an athlete, or you're dealing with an athlete, or you're a parent of an athlete, if you're starting to see this trend, you get it addressed. Females consumed less dairy, and I don't think they're trying to promote dairy. They're just saying calcium is a big one with building bones. Energy deficient. We talked about the REDS, the relative energy deficiency in sports, and they did not play ball sports. And I want to, this is something that's really interesting about youth athletes. There was really good research. If you are a youth athlete, especially a runner, that those athletes that play ball sports, multi-directional sports with running and cutting, they had better bone density. Those runners had better bone density. And the reason is bone likes stress. And so it doesn't mean that your child needs to go out and join a team, like a soccer team or a basketball team or anything, if they just like running, but have them go out and shoot a ball, shoot some hoops, or play around with a soccer ball. That running and cutting actually has really good evidence about building bone strength. And it's in those formative years. So or drills, if they have drills doing, side to side, but those sports where you just play, they call them ball sports usually, where you have those multi-directional side to side cutting things, are super great for bone density. So, something to keep top of mind with that.
Nice. So. Cool. How about, one of the traditional treatments is like ice. Like every time I see a kid coming out of the training room, he's got like ice strapped, to the front of his shins. He's walking around straight-legged with these 2 ice bags on the shins. Is ice good for shin splints, or what's the verdict there?
Yeah. Again, if you're dealing with something where you think this is just like, hey, it's the first week of practice and they're a little sore, totally. Because it can dim inflammation a little bit on a superficial level, right? It's funny because I've had a slew of bony stress injuries come in lately. And I had one client ask me, well, should I, and I thought they were kind of teetering on maybe, a stress reaction, a stress fracture at this point. I was sending them over to the doc to get some, to get screened. And they asked, should I take ibuprofen? And I was like, honestly, your bone needs to heal. So we really aren't recommending. One, I don't give advice on medications, but I was like, talk to the doctor about it. But our bone needs to heal, and sometimes dimming that natural inflammatory response when it comes to bone. And we know that we're trying to heal something that is maybe not just a normal reaction like a shin splint, but we're in kind of that more injury zone where we're dealing with a stress reaction. It can feel good, but sometimes it's best to kind of let the body just do its thing and heal, and not numb it. So it wouldn't hurt. I don't feel strongly about not doing ices versus doing a lot of anti-inflammatories. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. How about massage? We've got all these great tools out there. We're talking about some very small muscles. Is there words of advice for massage? What should be done? What shouldn't be done?
Yeah. So, the calf muscle, which is, the gastrocnemius is the 2 calf heads, and then the soleus, which is the deep calf muscle that's purely for the ankle. We can talk about calf strengthening a little bit later, or another podcast, but Those muscles, they're a little bit more chunky, so it's a massage there, a little bit light rolling. That's always fine. I would be careful. So if you lie on your side and there's some muscles called the Fibularis muscles that run along the side of the leg, and that's where that really thin little fibular bone is. I would be cautious about cranking on that one. Obviously, there's a nerve that goes down along there. So some massage is fine. Just don't obviously go crazy because you can irritate a nerve, or you can, the fibula is not a very thick bone. So, you can really kind of, get it angry. So
what you're saying is no percussion instruments, huh? Stay away from instruments. Okay. The calf muscles, I think you and I should do another episode on those, because I think that's, that's a whole, a discussion that we can really get deep dive into with all the calf muscles in that region. So we'll touch on that and how you can strengthen them and such. So we'll save that for another date. We've also talked here, and a lot of this discussion has been whether it's possible stress reaction or even stress fracture or worse. In that case, if the person has come to yourself or a physical therapist, but the pain it continues or has gotten worse, what's their next step?
Yeah. So when we're looking at a bone stress injury, and we're really looking at possibly something it's getting worse, it's alarming. I usually send them to an orthopedist. They have a good discussion. That's where we review health, lifestyle, also looking at imaging sometimes. So obviously the most inexpensive imaging is usually an x-ray. But unfortunately, x-rays are just not very sensitive when it comes to stress fractures. There's pretty good research behind it. Sometimes you'll see them, but if you don't, a lot of times the orthopedist won't really take that with a lot of with a lot of validity, and either recommend either an MRI or a bone scan. Sometimes ultrasound, in-office ultrasound imaging can look at some of that stuff. But they really want to make sure that they're not having someone continue to run on a stress fracture in a critical zone. And again, for the shin, the critical zone is that front tibia, that very front crest of your shin. So that's really what they want to make sure, because you don't want to get to a point where it possibly needs to be fixated. And that's also for the hip. There's a critical zone in the hip. There's one side of the hip bone that's a critical zone. So I'll just throw it out there. Try not to really bang into those things, because,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually all it means is really just to be not doing non-impact sports for a couple weeks when they're confirmed. So it's nothing to be scared about. It'll get you running. Bone heals really well. Again, in a healthy system, bone heals pretty well. So they usually just shut you down to aqua jogging for a while or elliptical, and then you're back at it.
Perfect. That was my next question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well done. Well done. That's awesome. Anything for the runner that has had shin splints for extended period of time, or a history of shin splints? It just keeps manifesting itself. Do you have anything you can kind of touch on for them?
Yeah. And those are great clients to work with, because you definitely have people that are like, all my life, my shins just kind of ache when I run. They're not really, they haven't been shut down by it, but it's just one of their, it's their proverbial Achilles heel. And usually that is a loading issue. There's something either going on with their form or with their, as far as internally their system, they can't handle some of the forces. And they usually do really well. And so especially for any novice runners out there, there was a study where I think 45% of novice runners that ran to injury never tried running again. These things are super, super common. So, if you tried running and you're like, oh gosh, my shins just keep hurting, I'm just giving it up, I'm not supposed to be a runner. That's sometimes what I'll hear. They're like, I really liked it, but then I think I just wasn't meant to be a runner because I had these shin splints. And that's not true. It's like knee pain. It's like a super common thing, and it usually can be solved. So if you're somebody that's had chronic shin splints, get somebody that, is really familiar with working with a runner, that looks at both your system and your movement patterns. And, it's usually pretty successful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything that we didn't touch on that you want to add to this conversation?
No. I just when we talk about shins, I love the discussion because there's so many reasons for shin splints. But just to highlight, especially if you're working with young athletes or young adults, to be aware of again the relative energy deficit in sports. If that might be an issue, that's a great way to become a stronger athlete by addressing that and deal with recurrent stress fractures. Kids, if you're working with student athletes, the best things you can do for them, other than I read off those things, but sleep, calf strengthening, multi-directional ball play, apart from running. These are great things to address in the young athlete. It'll give them good tools for the rest of their lives. And then as adults with shin pain, again, these reasons that people usually have are pretty simple. So, don't think you have to live with it just because it's not stopping you. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And I would say to any coaches listening out there of youth, especially those that are track coaches or cross country coaches, if you allow your kids prior to practice to just play soccer or throw around the football, or take an easy day and just play ultimate frisbee, these are all really good things that you can add into their training, gets them moving. Before the day, it's a good warm up for the kids. And then, as I said, with ultimate frisbee, they're moving all around and moving in all sorts of directions. So good way to incorporate it into their training. Keeps them fresh too. I think a lot of times with our youth, sometimes we forget that they are just young kids and they can have fun sometimes.
Definitely. So they need fun.
Yes. And Miriam, how can people reach out to you?
Yes, I have a website, runnersmechanic.com. I have an email, runnersmechanic@gmail. All my information's on there. The number on there is my cell phone. You can also text me. So if you have any questions, I love to talk about stuff like this. So just reach out to me.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Miriam. That was wonderful as always. Appreciate you.
Well, thanks for having me. That's really fun. I really enjoyed it.
Well, of course, Miriam is a wealth of knowledge and has tremendous tips. So I hope you're able to pick up some nuggets, in that conversation that will help you or help somebody that you know. So thank you, Miriam. And our next guest is Canyon Woodward, winner and new course record holder of the Cruel Jewel 100. So excited for Mr. Canyon. This conversation was fun. We really had a good time, and it was just real light and just like Canyon, just a real awesome person. So thank you. All right. Well, I welcome back in the shortest turnaround ever, Canyon Woodward, to the podcast. Canyon just won the Cruel Jewel 100 miler plus in Vogel State Park. He also set a new course record, which was amazing. And Canyon, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me back, Aaron.
We're actually live in person, so this is tremendous. It's awesome to see him. I haven't seen him in too long, since it was pre-COVID.
Yeah, so it's special to be face to face.
Yes, absolutely.
The world coming back.
Absolutely, and Canyon has some cool adventures to share, which we will get into for sure. And I want to start with just going back and talking about how this all started for you.
Yeah, I guess being the youngest of 4 kids, named Rivers, Forest, and Autumn, and Canyon, just grew up outdoors my whole life. My folks were all about taking us on trails from a young age. I think I went camping for the first time at like 3 weeks old. And yeah, it was always just running after them as we built forts and played in the woods, and never really thought about running. As a kid growing up, I was really into soccer and played tennis seriously year round, and so I'd run just to train for those other sports. But then it was in high school, my junior fall was when I got into running as an end in itself. My high school U.S. history teacher was the cross country coach, and she was just desperate for runners over in Franklin, and so she eventually convinced me to come out and try on a meet, and so I did, and I had a great time. Fell on my butt at least once hauling downhill, but finished with a big smile on my face, and I was pretty hooked from then. Loved running competitively in high school those last 2 years, and then went up north for college and was stuck in the cold, icy, dreary Boston winters, and didn't run as much through college. Definitely kept it up a bit, but getting to move back down south in 2015, 2016, I really picked it up again. And my older brother Forrest is also a great runner, and he was getting into ultras then, so he kind of once again dragged me along behind him, and that's how I really got back into it.
That's awesome. Yes. So Franklin High School has kind of a storied history, amount of amazing runners that came out of such a small town in such a, far western part of North Carolina. It's pretty amazing to see, with now they have a new set of twins that are this year doing amazing. They're seniors and on their way to college. And back when I was, running in college, I had two twins from Franklin that were outstanding.
Twins,
the Pons twins.
I remember staring up at their records. I think they still stands today.
And Daniel Hamilton, who's another amazing runner in his own right. So just some really amazing folks coming out of that small neck of the woods. It's amazing.
Yeah, and my cross country coach who convinced me into it, Denise Davis, she's a total boss. She ran the whole Bartram Trail from start to finish, 120 miles. So that was my first up close glimpse at like a really long distance. That blew my mind.
Yeah, sure. When was that? Like in your?
That was while I was in high school. So.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I can't imagine. Like I didn't even know about these type of things in high school, and to have somebody that was already doing those things, that's got to be pretty influential.
Totally.
And you had the Appalachian Trail right in your backyard too, right?
Yeah, can see Westerbold and Wya from the mailbox, and it's like a 20-minute drive to the trail at Tellico Gap.
You and your brother, I'll never forget the story. Like you guys, and I'll let you tell it. You were just out on a random Appalachian Trail run, and who did you come across?
Yeah, it was in 2016 in the heat of campaign season. I was managing the field program for a state senate candidate over here, and the days were just packed, and working 7 days a week, just crazy hours, and hadn't gotten in a good run in ages, but really wanted to get out with Forrest. So we got out to Sam's Gap,
yes.
Over on the Tennessee line before sunrise. It was still dark, so that I could get into work in time, and we went out on the trail, and this guy was his pass with Grateful Dead blasting, and maybe some funny smells, and another guy soon after him, and they're going pretty slow. I'm kind of like, who are these scrubs? Gosh, they're not moving that great. And it turns out it was just Carl Melzer casually breaking the AT speed record with Scott Jurek pacing him behind. And it was so great. Scott recognized Forrest and invited us to tag along for a bit, which was really fun.
That's awesome. That's such a cool story.
Forrest and I had been debating whether ultra runners actually run all of the uphills or not at that point, and we found out, at least in the case of running the whole AT, you do indeed hike the uphills.
That's for sure. And we'll talk about the cruel jewel and how those uphills worked out for you. But you said you kind of had a resurgence around 2015, and obviously a great influence by your brother. But what did you do then? Did you start ultra running in 2015?
Yeah, I worked on a film with Forrest a little bit called 3100 Run and Become, which is a great film by our friend Sanjay. And that was inspiring, just being around, the ultra scene.
That was the Transcendence run, right?
Yeah, it followed. That was the main focus and sort of the title focus, and then it also followed a couple of other storylines. So the one I got to help out with was out in Canyon de Che,
okay.
And just beautiful canyon country, and getting to go all through Navajo Nation, and just see some really really remarkable stories, and Forrest was really getting back into training at that point, and so just tagging along with him is what got me back into it. I had dabbled a little bit. Actually, I don't know if you know this story. You'll get a kick out of it if you don't. Freshman winter of college was the first time that I attempted an ultra distance, and it was frosty foot, and I hadn't trained at all since the previous fall over a year ago in high school cross country, and just went into it pretty cold, excited, and was hauling way faster than I should have, and it was going okay until about mile 24 or thereabouts, sometime before the last aid station, and I just hit an absolute wall like I never have in my life. I was like starting to kind of hallucinate aid stations around the next corner, and then I got to this tree that had fallen across the trail. It was just a few feet above it, and I just draped my body across the tree, and my arm was hanging down, kind of limp, right about at ground level, and I was so hungry. I was like, oh man, maybe the dirt would taste good. And I picked up some dirt and started eating it. And some people passed me and were horrified. Like, are you okay, man? Finally, I spared the rest of the folks and limped myself to the aid station. Just chowed down. The poor volunteers were watching me eat like everything they had. They were like, you gonna keep going, man? It's like, I don't think so. I'm just gonna finish these M&Ms and walk back to the cars.
Oh, that's great. Did you not finish that one?
No.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny. And for those that aren't familiar with Frosty Foot, Solly is another region in western North Carolina. It's a beautiful course on Fontana Lake, and it's a 50K, 30K, and 8K. It has changed hands a few times. I received it from the Faulkners and ran it for multiple years, and then I just turned it over to Will Jurgensen. So hopefully that race continues, because it's beautiful, and it's not a it's not a butt kicker. It's a great kind of first timer. That would have been a great first time 50K if Canyon had trained and fueled. But it's a tremendous event. That's great. So that was your first go at an ultra, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. And what? How did it proceed from there?
Actually, the next winter I did similar story, but I trained just a little bit through the fall and went down and did, I think, the Harbison 50K. I think that's what it was called.
Sure.
A real flat one
down in South Carolina.
Yeah. And just took it real nice and slow. And had a good time, and that was fun. And then the outdoor store in Franklin, Outdoor 76, puts on an awesome race called The Naturalist. Yep. They do a 25K and a 50K that starts out right in downtown Franklin, and goes up to the top of Wiebald, which is gorgeous, right on the AT, big fire tower, and then back down to downtown Franklin, and it's just a grueling course on a section of the Bartram Trail, and just the steepest uphills and steepest downhills. Yes. But that's a really fun one. That was the first I think the first one that I really trained for, because I knew that would be a bad deal if I didn't, and I can't remember when I first did that, but sometime around the end of college, I think.
Nice. That's awesome. And eventually, so how did your progression go? Because obviously you've done 100 miles multiple times now. Did you do anything in between distance-wise?
Yeah, nothing in between really. Did 50 miles on the Fontaine-Dango that you organized.
Yeah, sure.
That was really just kind of a training run. Didn't race it. Pretty much.
There was a little bit of a story there too, yeah? You brought your friend. You go ahead and talk about your friend too.
Oh yeah, our friend Brendan Leonard of Semi Rad, who's just a phenomenal writer and comic, came out for that one. And
he put on people will be familiar with his film. You want to touch on that too?
Oh yeah, he made How to Run 100 Miles.
Yes.
Yeah. He made a great short film on the Run Rabbit Run. Really. Really a big sell for making a 100-miler look fun. Not exactly, but an awesome film.
That was hysterical. Yeah, because you guys had run that, and I didn't realize who he was at the time. I had seen the film, but didn't make the connection. And I was listening to, I think it was Ultra Running Podcast with Eric Strands, and he was the guest. And he's like, yeah, I just ran this like little 50-mile race out in Western North Carolina. My friends recruited me to go run this, and I had no idea. Because Fontaine-Dango was at Fontana Village, which is a resort kind of by Fontana Lake, and it's got, it's 5 laps, and it's about 8,000 feet of 8 to 10,000 feet of gain, something like that. So it surprised him. It was pretty funny. So.
I love bringing friends out from the West Coast and blowing their minds. That
was pretty comical. So yeah, you did do that 50-mile, and then you moved up to your first 100, which was which one?
Yeah, first one was the C&O Canal 100, which super flat. I'll never do a flat 100 again like that, but that probably an okay one to ease into.
Yeah. And you did that with your brother too, correct?
Yeah, did that with Forrest, and Brendan came out actually to pace us for that one. It was great. He came in at mile 70 with a playlist that he'd made for us, which was super sweet, but we hated it. It was making us nauseous. Forrest dropped back like 100 yards after a shot, and I finally asked him to turn it off. And he was real talkative, just super upbeat, which is great, but we were just in the heart of darkness, just like plowing forward. And he was so self-aware about it and awesome. He sent a hilarious meme about it in the morning of when your pacer shows up extra chatty at the end of the race. But never really planned. The 100-miler kind of just came out of having a lot of time on our hands. we were getting into running, had done the naturalist, it went well, and we're like, all right, let's pick up a training plan. And I opened up the book Relentless Forward Progress, and I was like, all right, what's the best they've got in here? And there's training for 100-milers. So I was like, all right, let's do this running plan first. And so we started doing that, and it wasn't until we were a good ways into it that we were like, well, I guess we should look for a 100-miler to run if we're doing the training plan for a 100-miler. So that's how we did that, and that was in 2018 in the spring, and have kind of been on a cycle since then of putting in a hard six or so months, give or take, through the winter training, and then doing a 100-miler or a long objective in the spring.
Nice. That's cool. So 2018, so then 2019, that brought you to Hellbender, right?
Yeah.
And Hellbender was obviously a different experience than the C&O.
Yeah. Understatement.
And we can talk as much or as little as you want about that one. I got to obviously witness that one firsthand. Why don't you talk a little bit about like what transpired?
Yeah. Oh man, the Hellbender was awesome. That was my first real encounter with a big long distance mountain race. And gosh, the Hellbender's an incredible race. You put on just such a cool event. It's so grueling. I feel like I'd put in a really solid training season in the lead up, with this slight asterisk of an ill-advised taper at the end that involved a 3-week bender down the Grand Canyon with friends, just super lethargic on rafts, drinking beer from sun up to sundown.
You were well tapered.
Very well tapered, extra well tapered. And yeah, I think the race went okay for the amount of experience I had at the time and for the taper that I had put in. I went out pretty fast and was, with the 3 of us at the front through the first third of it or so, and then I opened up a little bit of a lead through the middle sections and was feeling great. Accidentally took a wrong turn and started going back up Mount Mitchell a second time.
I got a phone call for that.
Yeah, I got service and I called Aaron. I was like, it looks so familiar. I felt like Frodo and Sam in Lord of the Rings. We're going in circles.
I was so glad that I had reception.
Yeah,
I told him to turn around and go back down to the aid station and hang a right.
Yeah. So I did that. At that point, I saw Sam coming in the sight behind me, and that made me really turn on the jets frantically, and I really botched my fueling and hydration at that point, and came into mile 72 right around dusk. Was feeling okay, but I sat down, changed out of my soaking socks and shoes, and my friend Chloe, who we talked about last time on the podcast, had come down from Maine to help crew, and my freshman roommate from college had come to help pace me on that 8-mile section, but they had just arrived from the airport. We hadn't seen each other in ages, so it was kind of like reunion, like chatty, like, yeah, good to see you. And they had never, crewed any kind of event like that, so not much conception of like, okay, we should get going. So I came out of there really feeling the stiffness setting in on my legs. Was peeing a pretty dark, kind of reddish color. It was definitely descending into not a great place, and Sam whizzed by me on the uphill climb out of there, and I had looked at the elevation profile in my last minute planning the day before, and the 72-mile to 80-mile stretch on the super zoomed out elevation profile looked so chill. I was like, oh, this is gonna be a great little just like 8-mile cruise downhill to the mile 88 station, but you zoom in on that and it's the most brutal up and down just quads breaking stretch.
That's the infamous stretch of Neals Creek up to the Parkway, and then you descend to Lead Mine, and then everybody that has run or knows of Lead Mine, it is probably one of the worst sections of the course, just because of where it is and what it is. It's so yes, I'm sorry.
It broke me so bad. Apology accepted. A few years late, but I'll take it. No. But yeah, came limping into 80, just feeling like, so bad. I honestly felt like I was going to pass out if I tried to keep on running. I could have. It would have taken very little to convince me to drop at that point, but luckily had Forrest tapping in at that point to pace me, and he was phenomenal. Just got me to keep shuffling along. I couldn't eat anything. I was so nauseous, but he kept on just trying to get me to take a bite of plain bagel, and kept doing that. And finally I was able to eat a little bit, and then a little bit more, and he got me eating again, and finally starting to jog some and hike there's a long climb out of there after you get off the roads, and then by the time we got up and over, was able to turn it on again and run pretty well down to the finish.
Nice. Yeah, which puts you in third.
Yeah.
So you took third overall, and you still broke 24 hours.
Yeah. I was actually looking back at it, planning for the Cruel Jewel, and I realized that in my head I felt like, I totally blew up, and didn't do near as well as I wanted. But I was looking at my my prep for that, and I think my fast goal was 23 hours, and I think I came in like 23:12. I want to say I was only like 12 minutes off of the goal time that I'd set. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So takeaways from Hellbender that helped you for Cruel Jewel.
Yeah. A lot of them. It was such a learning experience. I mean, fueling and hydration were definitely up there at number one. I think just not letting those slip, just staying on it early. There were a couple of points where I ran out of water in between aid stations.
What were you carrying?
I was carrying just 2 soft flasks.
Okay.
And I kicked myself for not having 3.
Yeah, there are some long sessions on Hellbender that or there's just remote, and if you have a filter you'd be okay, but
totally.
Yeah, but if you don't have that extra capacity, it can come back and bite you for sure.
Yeah,
especially if it's warm.
Yeah, and being prepared for the nighttime section, I wore contacts for Cruel Jewel, and I was going a little blind bat in the the darkness of Hellbender. I'd started out wearing my glasses, but it was so rainy. I put them away, and I think I don't know. I guess I just forgot to pull them out again for the night section in my stupor.
What do you do for lighting? Did you do anything differently from Hellbender to Cruel Jewel, or did you?
Yeah, I had a black diamond. I don't know the model, but it takes like 4 AA batteries. It's a beast. It has
Icon probably.
Okay, yeah, it stays bright for a while. And I had that for the Hellbender, but I didn't use it for that 72 to 80 section because I was like, this won't take more than hour and a half.
It's 3 hours later.
Yeah. Yeah. That, and then just the huge importance of an awesome crew and good pacing to come in and carry your carcass to the finish line.
Right on. Anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, feel like those
are the main points.
Well, also not sitting down. That was a big thing I put in my notes to the crew this time around. Was like,
don't let me sit. Yeah,
if at all possible. Yeah, no sitting down, especially after mile 50.
Yeah,
my bread and butter's flying recklessly downhill, and after my legs stiffened up a little bit, I wasn't able to do that on the Hellbender.
Yeah, right on. Well, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what you did, differently, especially nutritionally in Cruel Jewel. But did you plan on running Cruel Jewel in 2020?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And it just got deferred, obviously, to this year.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the training for this one. What did that look like? Did you go to the Grand Canyon 3 weeks prior? Or?
Yeah, my taper was much more sane for this one. Yeah, I did. So I was training for it in 2020, like you said, and then ended up doing an attempt at the SCAR instead in early June.
Right. Which you still had a great run. You were
came up well short of the FKT, but it was a great experience. That's such an amazing route through the Smokies.
Yeah.
Just gorgeous. Kind of bonked on that one too, and got a bit dehydrated. So another good learning. And then it was I was managing Chloe's state senate campaign like we talked about a couple weeks ago, and so I was straight back into that, as well as balancing another part-time job in climate work, and so really didn't run to speak of after that, like June through November, just like a little bit here and there where I could fit it in, just right. For my mental health. But got to come back to North Carolina right after the election, like mid-November, and took about a month of just full-on reset, coming down off of the craziness of campaigning, and then started to get in a good rhythm of running again, kind of towards the end of December, and started training seriously like right around the beginning of January.
Great. Yeah. Did you have any lead-up events?
No,
I
don't think so.
Okay.
Oh, I did the 7 miler over at Black Rock.
Oh yeah, the assault.
Silva. Yeah,
the assault on Black Rock. Yeah. Nice.
But, yeah, and training was like, I think for the most part, like 55, 60 miles a week was generally what I was doing. I had
nice.
one week, maybe a month or so ago, where I did a back-to-back, and that was an 80-mile week. But
right on. What was your longest run?
Longest run was 25 miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And, I mean, obviously out there in Franklin, you've got plenty of opportunities for vert. Do you remember what your biggest vert week was?
No, I'm not sure. I wasn't really tracking vert actively.
Well, you're on Strava, so anybody interested could really just follow you on Strava. It's just Cany and Woodward, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're interested, you guys can dive back and see.
Yeah. My go-to runs were that Teleco Gap to Wyabald section of the AT and back, which has a good bit in it, and then the Bartram Trail out of Franklin, which has so much, and then even the midweek seeking out flatter ground section, unless you just do laps in the Baptist Church parking lot, you can't find too much flat ground. So yeah, even on the easy days was picking up a decent amount.
Nice. Cool. So this leads you up to the race itself. What was kind of your plan? What were you thinking ahead of time? What did you have, like a pacing plan, a time goal, anything like that?
Yeah, my time goal was 26 hours, which I thought was pretty ambitious. That would have been top 5 at that point for the course, kind of based my goal times for each aid station just based off of someone. I forget who it was, but someone ran it in 25 hours exactly a couple of years ago. So that was a really easy one to just convert the math off of. Okay, convert 25 to 26. And so with no knowledge of how that race actually went for him, he could have been flying through the first half and then bonked the second. And then I'm stuck with a crazy plan. But that's how I did it, for better or worse. Yeah, and my mom was phenomenal crew chief as usually, just had it dialed, and dad on support as well. And my brother Rivers came out from a full day working at his clinic to crew the graveyard shifts through the night. And my friend Abby came out from Boulder to help crew, and then paced me for the final 30.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's cool. So just one pacer, just Abby, final 30.
Yeah,
right on. This race is it 106? Am I thinking right?
Yeah, they say 106. My watch
said something else.
Said they were like 108 or 109.
Yeah, and I think Mark Rollins texted me, and he had 112.
Okay.
So there's some bonus miles in there somehow, which, given the time you ran, is incredible for having whatever the distance is. And then the vert. For those of you that don't know, Cruel Jewel, what did you get for vert totals?
My watch actually died at like mile 75, and I stuck it in my bag with a charger, and it fell out.
Oh no,
which is a huge bummer. So I'm not sure what the vert tally was. They say it's 33,000 feet of gain. I'm not sure that it's quite that much, but
yeah,
it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so race day is coming. You're looking at the weather. What were you thinking?
Oh my God, the weather could not have been more splendid. Wow.
I know.
It was crazy. I mean,
that's fantastic.
Talk about perfect.
Yeah,
we got a day or two of rain midweek, so the course was still just like really nice and soft, but not muddy at all to speak of. And
sweet.
Yeah, and then it was, gosh, I don't remember. I think like high in the mid 60s or something like that.
Because it's a noon start. Yeah.
Yeah, noon start, which I loved. Slept in till like 8 a.m. in the morning.
Nice.
Had a leisurely morning. Got over there, and there was a nice cloud cover for a lot of that afternoon too. And then
that's fantastic. Yeah. When I tried to run it in 2019, it was like 85 or 6 at the start. And it just got hotter.
Yeah, that would have been a race.
That's the typical weather, but you guys had a beautiful year this year, which is amazing. Starts in Vogel State Park, and anybody that's run Georgia Death Race or Duncan Ridge or H9, they all have the same type of start. And you kind of start a little bit on the park road, and then you just hit the single track, pretty much not even like a half mile into the race. So how were things when you started? Were you feeling light and good to go?
Yeah, I was feeling great. I mean, I was I'm the furthest from type A, always late everywhere, and chronically underprepared. So I was like stressing my whole team out at the beginning, trying to get my contacts in with like 8 minutes till start time, and then hadn't gotten my pack loaded up for the first 20 miles of gels and whatnot till I'd see my crew again. So I was stuffing them in my pack as I walked towards the line, and
that sounds about right.
2 minutes from starting gun got to the line with final things in the bag. And, but yeah, went out there feeling good, blowing my kazoo that I found in a stray pocket, and went out at a relaxed, fast clip with a couple of other guys at the front. About a mile and a half or so climb out of there, and then I made my big move at mile 2, because that's what it's all about in a 100-miler. That's where you win it. So I passed them and went flying downhill to the first little water aid station. And then
so you had
blacked out for 100 miles, and then I was at the finish, and it was a good deal.
So you said you packed your bag full of gels. Just talk about what was the kind of stuff that you packed. What were you subsisting off of?
Spring gels was my go-to.
All right.
Funny story there too. Actually, I'd run out of them. I don't use them training that much because they're ridiculously expensive.
I just ordered some last night.
Anybody has an in, holler at me. But yeah, so I had ordered a shipment for the Cruel Jewel, and I was on just an easy jog, grabbed them out of the mailbox, and typical Western North Carolina style, we're up this super long dirt road from the mailbox, and I was like, oh my gosh, this package is so heavy. I don't feel like jogging with it all the way home, so I left it at the end of our dirt driveway, which doesn't have any traffic at all, and anyway, the package disappeared.
Oh, no.
Which is crazy. I can't wrap my head around it, but so then that was like a week out.
Oh, God.
But that had shipped on Monday and gotten there on a Thursday, so I was like, okay, I think if they get it in the mail Monday, we should be okay. So reordered, and anyway, the reorder did not come through in time.
Oh, no.
Luckily found a shop on the way back from picking Abby up from the Atlanta airport.
Oh my gosh.
Stock up on them. So,
Jeez.
So I had my spring gels, and
somebody else has your spring gels too.
Yeah, someone else too. Yeah, and then quesadillas are my other big food that's consistently palatable.
Right. Okay. And was that something that the crew made for you, or did they have those at the aid stations?
Yeah, most the crew made it for me. The aid stations had them, but
You're picky.
Really got no. It was such a bummer. I mean, obviously, all of the folks at the aid stations were awesome, but I don't know that they were not ready for me.
Oh, you were coming through quick.
Through. There was never
no hot food ready.
No hot food. So
how did your crew make those? What did you guys have with you?
They had just a little pocket rocket.
Oh, okay.
Stove with a
nice.
pan.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
that worked well.
That was nice. Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. And then what did you guys do for hydration?
I tried to take in I kind of just drank to feel. Like I would try and do a flask of Tailwind, a flask of water between each, and the aid stations were really close together, which is really nice. The longest one was 7.5 miles, I think, but most of them were more like 5 or 6.
Gotcha.
So was able to really get away well with just 2 flasks. And
good.
Yeah, I'd never really done Tailwind in the race. I think that definitely threw me on Hellbender as well. I drank maybe like 1 or 2 flasks of Tailwind, but yeah, took in a lot more electrolytes this time.
Good.
I maybe took 1 or 2 little salt chews as well, and was pounding some sea salt and vinegar chips and Pringles and salty peanut butter pretzels and whatnot.
Cool.
So that helped.
Yeah, good. That sounds like the nutrition was more on point this go around.
Yeah.
You didn't have any energy lulls?
No. Stephanie, who we were chatting with a couple weeks ago here on the podcast, just who's a doctor, dietitian, ultra running genius. She was just like fuel early, fuel often, just really prioritized that from the get-go, so I did, and that really served me well.
Good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, you kind of talked about earlier how do ultra runners hike?
Indeed.
Indeed they do. So, Cruel Jewel is nefarious for just no switchbacks. The way they cut the, especially the Duncan Ridge Trail, and I've talked about this in the past, it's just straight up and straight down. Going through the race, did you hike early or did you try to run early? What was your plan there, or how did it actually pan out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I decided to go ahead and take my poles with me from the get-go rather than pick them up at 20, just to keep myself honest with not going out too fast, because I think I have a tendency to do that. And so I used them. I broke out the poles some as early as the second climb coming out of Wolf Creek, long climb up to the top of Coosa. So I was speed hiking that for some good portions, and then jogging the easier inclines.
But nobody had gone with you from 2 miles on. Nobody was.
Yeah. No.
They just let you
go. Thankfully, never. I mean, not really. Thankfully, but yeah, never. Was lonely at the front.
Did you have any type of music or anything like that?
No, I didn't. I had some headphones as an option in my night bag when I restocked, but I never pulled them out.
Wow. I mean, so basically 70 miles, and you're just kind of you just, like you said, you just blacked out, but yeah, you're just in your own thoughts.
Yeah, I had some songs stuck in my head from the aid stations here and there, but just chugging along,
right on.
Enjoying.
Easy to stay positive, or was there any times where
Yeah, pretty good staying positive. I was just really preparing for a blow up at mile 75, like happened in the Hellbender, and just trying to really enjoy the feeling of being out there in these mountains that I love so much, and just like enjoying that perfect weather and beautiful crescent moon, and getting to run through the night during the reasonably early stretch of the race. And
you get to when you spin around, you get to see people because it's an out and back. So,
right. Yeah.
That must have been great.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. That was really nice getting to see folks. I coming out of. You turn around at Camp Morganton, and that stop didn't feel like it went great. I think I was there for upwards of 15 minutes, maybe, at like mile 50.
Why was that?
Let's see. I guess I was waiting on food a little bit. Trying to get some hot soup and broth, and putting on, changing clothes, putting on pants, getting warm stuff for the night.
And kind of just a resupply.
Yeah. I was way ahead of the time that I told my crew I was going to be there, so they were just getting there and kind of getting organized. So there's a little bit of shuffling around, just trying to find different things and make sure I was good to go for a long stretch back on my own. But coming out of there, I saw Chris, who's in second, coming in. Just he was only a few miles out at that point, so. I think that gave him some motivation, I'm sure, to make an efficient turnaround there, and he was hot on my tail from there. I was really feeling his heat throughout the whole rest of the race, which was awesome. I think for both of us, it was really cool. He was 8 minutes behind me at the next aid station at Deep Gap.
Yeah.
And I had my phone with me, and I pulled up the live tracking to see what my margin was, and I saw that, and that was kind of in that stretch was the only time that my thoughts verged towards the negative a little bit, just beating myself up a bit for not being more efficient through Camp Morganton. But then I was kind of like, hey, I took my time to really eat and fuel well there, and I'm feeling good because of that. And I was able to really turn it on for that loop out of Deep Gap and back to Deep Gap. I think I ran it significantly faster than I did on the way out. And I think I was looking at it yesterday. I think I was pretty close to a negative split overall.
Wow.
I had to look at it more closely, but the way back went great.
Awesome. That's cool. No problems with the feet or chafing or anything?
No, not bad. Just a tiny bit of your normal chafing, but nothing that was distracting and
good. No blistering.
No, yeah. I was a little bit worried about my feet, first maybe 30 miles in or so, I was like, wow, I forgot how much it hurts your feet to pound them for this long. But I don't know, I guess they went numb at some point and didn't feel them anymore, which was nice.
What did you choose for footwear?
Let's see, I hadn't gotten new running shoes in I think about 3 years, maybe two and a half years, which I don't recommend, especially now in comparison. Looking back at it, I just joined this awesome amateur racing team based out of the Craftsbury Outdoor Center in Vermont, all remote based, called the Green Racing Project. Which is a great crew, but they bought me some shoes, and I got some of the Hoka Evo Speed Goats.
Oh, cool!
And those felt great.
Awesome.
Yeah,
nice. That's a good choice, especially for that course.
Yeah,
nice. Very good. So picked up Abby around 70 ish. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure that's always uplifting. Especially seeing a friend and having company since you've been alone for so long.
Yeah.
And obviously it must have been a uplift of the spirit. So talk about from there onward, how did that go?
Yeah. Picked up Abby. She's a phenomenal athlete. She won a national championship as a triathlon, and top 5 at North Face 50, and just all around.
Wow.
Phenomenal crusher. So it was great to have her in the crew all day, just absolutely pushing me through the aid stations, and then picking her up. Was just really good for reminding me to stay on top of fueling, especially through the last 30, especially like I remember it. I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 miles out. I was like, oh, we're only 8 or 10 miles out. I can probably stop eating now. And she was like, hell no, shut that down real quick.
That's great.
It was great having company through the last of the dark hours, and
cool.
Beautiful sunrise, and
oh man, that's awesome.
Valleys just filled with clouds,
and the inversion. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Cool. And then there's one more kick in the teeth. You have that, the downhill that you descended at the beginning to take your lead. You got to climb back up that.
Yeah, back up Kusa, the spine of the dragon, I think they call it. Honestly, we were prepared for that one to be way worse, but it kind of just flew by all right, and then started on. There's a long descent from there, pretty much from the top of Kusa to that Wolf Creek aid station at a little over 3 miles out, and so was able to. I still had it in my legs to just let loose and lean downhill and just was just flying downhill to Wolf Creek. Lost Abby, and was able to just keep on running from Wolf Creek at a little over 3 miles out. There's about a 2 mile climb there, and I was able to run almost all of that uphill. And
did Abby ever catch back up, or
no?
Gotcha. Right on. So you got your final descent. Were you checking your live tracking still, or?
That was when I asked Abby to pull it up, and and then I snuck away as she was looking at the phone. Pulled my move. Never. I didn't get the last update. Decided to just best strategy was just haul ass for the finish. So that's what I did. And Chris was hot on my tail. He came in a solid, I think 30 minutes ahead of the previous best.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you finished and got a new course record, which was 21. Help me here. 21. Do you remember?
I think it was 22:36. I want to say.
Okay.
And the previous was like 23:15 50 or thereabouts.
Which was Avery Collins? Did Avery had the record? Do you remember?
No, I'm blanking.
Or was it Carl?
Carl Meltzer had said it, and then it had been broken. But I'm blanking on the name.
Yeah, that's okay. We can we can all look back at Ultra Sign Up and see. So yeah, you finished with the course record. Congratulations on that. That's amazing. Aside from the win, Chris obviously had a great run as well. And rounding out the top three was Jonathan Eibach. And Jonathan has also won Hellbender. He was second at Hellbender to Carl the year Carl ran.
Yep.
So really cool to see. I didn't know Chris, but did you know Chris?
No. From Fort Collins.
Yep. Yeah. So super cool. Was qualifying or getting a qualifier for Hard Rock, was that part of why you did it, or yeah?
Yeah, totally. That was getting into the Hard Rock and Western States lotteries and getting UTMB points was kind of that was what drew me to sign up for it originally.
Right on. Yeah. Excellent. So you've started your tickets going for the two big US ones and started getting your points for UTMB. Any other races that you're thinking of for UTMB points, or it's going to be interesting to see how they announce things with you saw their merger, it's like a business partnership with Ironman.
Okay, I didn't.
Okay, yeah, so they're going to start creating kind of a Grand Prix, if you will, and you can collect what they're terming stones, and this is something that they've started recently, but if you do a UTMB race, you can collect a stone, and then the more stones you collect, the better your chances are in the lottery. The unfortunate thing is we do not have one in North America. So yeah, and which is what I kind of perceive as why they brought in Ironman, is to help kind of create something here within the United States that's going to be able to hold something like a UTMB, because here obviously, I mean, just as you saw in Cruel Jewel and Hellbender, we're obviously limited in numbers, and that's by permit. So I'm not sure how they're going to get by that, because UTMB being 2,500 people just in the 100-miler alone, I don't foresee we'd be able to do that unless it's on like private property. So we'll have to see how that goes. But super cool. Yeah, I'm glad you got those in, man. It's now it becomes the sustaining your lottery tickets. Which I guess Western States is really cool, because they just said you won't lose your tickets if you do not do one the next year. You just don't go into the lottery. So that's pretty cool. Because I've known people that have lost all of their tickets because they couldn't get a qualifier in. But so yeah, it's a good time to start putting in your tickets.
I'm excited to see what happens. I'm getting to go out and crew Hard Rock.
Cool.
Help man the Kroger's Canteen aid station this summer at like mile 70 something out there. Cool. So I'm really excited just to get a taste of it and get to help folks through the end of it.
That's very cool. Any other plans for you for this year?
TBD. Was really just waiting to see how this went. My MO has, like I said, really just been to train for one big one and then slack off for the rest of the year. But I feel like I'm coming out of Cruel Jewel still with a, already feeling pretty good.
Yeah, he's walking pretty well, folks. He's walking pretty well. Yeah. We're recording this on Monday, the 17th, and he just finished on Saturday, the 15th. So he looks like he's doing pretty well.
I'm hungry for more, so taking recommendations for sure.
That's awesome. We talked about last episode how people can connect with you, but what's we'll just review that.
Emails canyonwoodward@gmail.com. I'm on Instagram and Strava, and would love to connect on any of those platforms.
Well, thanks again, buddy, and once again, congratulations on such a fantastic race.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
Congrats once again to Canyon Woodward, new course record, just amazing. Love Canyon, I love his attitude, just so young, vibrant, and happy and grateful. Just really, just amazing person. So congrats, Canyon. So fantastic. And thank you once again to Miriam Salloum for her conversation. I really appreciate the time and for all that she shares. We've already come up with a few new conversations that we want to have going forward. So she will, of course, be a repeat guest just because I feel like we can learn so much. So thanks to her. In other news, once again, my voice is strained. Last night we had our middle school conference meet. My son ran, so I am recording this on May 19th, and he did tremendous, as did all the middle schoolers. It was really fun to watch. Being a big running fan like I am, it's just fun to be around track and field at whatever level. And especially to watch your son, it's just such a treat. He did phenomenal. I was watching him in the mile, and I get carried away. Just get so caught up in his splits and and making sure he's okay. It's like a parent worrying. Obviously I am a parent worrying, but even as a coach, I get caught up in all my athletes. We had a phenomenal performance from one of our women. She did so amazing. She's a 7th grader, ran the mile as well. Set a new school record. She ran 5:39. It was just so cool. Keegan ended up running 4:54, and both of them won. 2 big PRs, just amazing performances by both. Prior to recording this, I was listening to George Sheehan's book. If you're not familiar with George Sheehan, he used to write for Runner's World magazine. He was very philosophical. Really enjoyed his articles. He has a book. It's called Running and Being. It's tremendous. I've had it in the newsletter in the past, I just like to listen to it every now and again. And I was listening to this chapter, and he's talking about the mile and the difference between the mile and everything else. He says there's 3 different how did he term it? Disciplines in running. And there's the dash or the sprints, and there's the mile, and then there's the marathon. We're talking kind of obviously Olympic distances here, and but he defined them as the sprints are physical. It really just requires your physical being. The marathon is both physical and mental, in which you have to go, to the depths of your mind to fight through the walls that come later in the race. But the mile he termed as both physical and mental, and also spiritual. And if you've not ever raced the mile on the track, or just in a road race or something, it truly is a different event. The places that you have to go, the discomfort that you have to feel, is just amazing. I can't stress. I think the best kind of summarization of the mile I've ever read was in the fictional book Once a Runner, and I've talked about that in the past, by John Parker Jr. And he just did an amazing job in Once a Runner of describing the mile and what it feels like. I chased the sub 4 mile myself, and the closest I ever came was 4:08. So it was amazing, to see that in these kids, and just see the fight. Keegan ran by himself, but he was pushing. He was pushing hard. So really awesome to see that desire to go into the depths of the soul, to pull out whatever was gonna come from that race, as well as from the young lady on our team that ran. It was she had a challenge this young woman from another team had beaten her in cross country at conference, and we knew they'd be racing head to head in the mile. Both of them were fresh for the mile, and the other young woman from the other team just sat on our girl, and they went through 3 laps, and then the other young woman tried to take the lead, and they fought that last lap. And I mean, it was hard. I mean, even at the line, I really couldn't have told you who won. Thankfully, they had a camera system, and our young lady obviously came out on top. It was tremendous, inspirational. Whatever level it's run, it's just fun and inspirational to watch, especially when you see the joy and exuberance, and the fatigue that comes with racing, the mile. It was tremendous. So, congrats to all those kids. And Keegan came back in the 800. This time he had somebody behind him, which he didn't know. He was running out front again, and looked back, and there was a kid giving him chase. And so, he pushed it to the line and ran a PR of 2:15 for the 800. So just absolutely tremendous. It was so fun to watch, and he's got one more meet this season. We're going to an invitational, and, just see what he can do. Hopefully lower that mile time down one more time, since the season has been so abbreviated, and we just had to cram in a bunch of races because of the schedule we were handed. Wasn't ideal for training, but I thought these kids did amazing. So, but we're already getting ready for cross country. I'm gonna take on the middle school role as my daughter's coming up, not next year but the following. So I'm gonna be coaching cross country with those kids. So I look forward to that. It's so invigorating and motivating, inspiring. They're just great kids to be around. It's really cool to be a part of. And I encourage you, the track seasons are still going on. So, if you have a local high school that you're around, see if they have a home meet, just go out and check it out, because it's just amazing to watch these kids go at whatever level. Like I said, just go watch and cheer them on. Check out the field events. These kids are, they're putting out their all. It's really cool. So, I encourage you to do that. So far as coaching goes, man, I can't thank people enough for trusting me and wanting to come on board. It's tremendous. I say that quite often, but like I said, I'm very grateful, and that's I'm just so grateful that I've been afforded this opportunity. That people trust me. And have come on board with the coaching program. I will say that I really have to kind of start being careful with how many I take on board. So I do encourage you to reach out to Thad, Coach Thad. His information is on the website mrrunningpains.com. He's definitely has some openings for some folks for coaching. But if you feel I'm a better fit, don't hesitate to reach out. I really enjoy, having those conversations, and don't forget, there are the individualized plans. So if you're not looking for one-on-one coaching per se, there are the individualized plans that we will create after a conversation. We have a conversation and talk about your goals and your training and all that, and then I'll write the plan. We'll have another conversation, and then off you go. You don't have to have one-on-one coaching. You have the plan, and you just do your thing, and hopefully it prepares you as best as possible for race day. So those are available, 12, 16, or even 20-week programs, or even 24 if you need be. It depends on where you're at with your fitness and what you're looking to do. But don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to have those conversations as well. That's easy enough. Just email me for those. And to those that have reached out on Strava, my God, I can't believe I have about 2 weeks to Old Dominion 100. Came about obviously so quickly. Was not anticipating getting into it. To be honest, I had almost forgotten about it. I guess I was kind of let down when it came to the realization that Hard Rock wasn't going to happen. So I just kind of turned my focus forward to to grindstone. And then when I got that email, I was, I was it really did excite me. It's been great. Just kind of, turned the burner back on a little bit and got me moving again. I'm really excited for this adventure. Matter of fact, one of my friends that I met through the Runner's World photo contest that we did back in 2016, it was his name is Michael Harms, and he runs with his son Donald, who's a quadriplegic. And they will not be doing the Old Dominion together, but Donald should be out there supporting and cheering on his dad, Michael, and his family. Hope they're amazing people, and I really look forward to seeing them. He's doing his first 100-miler, so super cool. And to those of you that have reached out on Strava or reached out to me on other platforms and just asking questions, thank you. I love that. I love people coming to me with questions, whether it be about footwear or training or racing or any of that. I love those conversations. I'm certainly glad and as I said, just blessed to be able to reach out and contact and be a part of other people's journeys and such. So if you do have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here to answer whatever questions I can. So thank you guys. And so far as the newsletter goes, May just got away from me. Obviously, it's just been so hectic with everything going on. So June we'll have kind of a May-June catch-up newsletter, and I'll get back on a monthly basis after that. And same with YouTube. Just have not had free time to post any new videos. So those are coming. I do have a lot of videos that I'm wanting to make. So got a lot of shoe reviews that I need to catch up on. I've been running in some really cool shoes, testing out. I talked about the Innovate, their new Terrafly Ultra 300. I think that shoe's pretty cool. I did a pretty big run in on it this past weekend. Got about 25 miles in. Good mix of single track and service road. And really was pleased with it. I actually thought about using it for Old Dominion, but I think I'm gonna go. Also got the Lone Peak 5. Lone Peak 5 seems to be a little bit more of my speed. Kind of like the stack height a little bit more. My foot feels a little bit more comfortable. The toe box is a little bit wider. Not that I have a wide foot. I just like the splay. But anyhow, got a lot of shoe reviews to catch up on as well. Been running in some pretty cool shoes, so got some things to talk about. But anyhow, want to thank you guys, especially obviously those that support me on Patreon. My gosh, thank you all so much for your monthly pledges. If you can support on Patreon, there's a link on my website, mrrunningpains.com. You can click the link. As little as $1 a month, it all helps keep this podcast going. Hopefully, I'm giving you guys relevant and fun information. Got a really cool podcast coming on next week. And we'll be catching up with Natalie Daniel. She finished up the Brute series, and we'll also be talking with the creator of the Brute challenge. He's coming on the podcast, and we'll be speaking with Charles. And so it'll be another dual episode, 2 different conversations: Natalie's conversation, and then my conversation with Charles. So that'll be next week's episode. So please, as always, if you haven't done so already, please like the podcast, leave a review. That all helps the word get out about the podcast. Certainly appreciate all your support and your time. And so until next time, my friends, keep running.
Wrote this song while crewing Aaron on a 100-mile foot race through the trails in the rain and mud. How about that? 100, 100 miles to go. 100, 100 miles to go. Don't ask me why I do it, I don't know. Miles by foot. 100, 100 miles by foot. Don't ask me why I do it, I can't stay put. Rain is a coming, can't give a fit. Rain is a coming, rain is a coming, can't give a fit.